as we mentioned, every object of class account is going to have a name. Certainly every bank account within a real bank has an account holder, and each of those account holders has their own name. So we're going to implement that concept as we design our class account as a so-called instance variable of the class. For every instance of the class that we create, that is, every object we create, there will be a separate copy of the class's instance variables. In this case, we have one instance variable called name, which is a string piece of data as declared here with the string keyword. Now, we've also declared this instance variable with the keyword private, which is a so-called access modifier. Any piece of data and anything else actually that you declare in the class with the keyword private is known only within the so-called scope of the class, only within the curly braces of that class's definition. So what we're saying is every account object will have a name, but only the account object is allowed to manipulate that variable directly. And the way that we're going to enable the so-called clients of the class, such as class account test, which uses an account object, the way we're going to allow clients to interact with the name is by calling the getName method to obtain the value and the setName method to set the value. And we'll look at those method definitions in subsequent videos. Now, every instance variable you create is defined within the body of the class, but outside of the definitions of the class's methods, or as we'll see in later examples, outside of the property declarations as well. And just another side note on instance variables, we place them in all of our class definitions right up at the beginning of the class, but as long as the instance variable is not defined inside the body of a method or property, it can be placed anywhere within the class's set of curly braces. So I could move line 7 down here to line 14, or even between lines 19 and 20 as well. And depending on what object-oriented programming language you learned first, you may have different preferences for where you'd like to place your data. In C#, by convention, the data is generally placed at the beginning of the class definition, but you can also place it at the end of the class definition as well. Now, one other note about the string instance variable name. All instance variables get a default value. The default value for a string is the value null. So this is the same as if I had written equal sign and the keyword null, which indicates a reference to nothing. This would say that the string variable does not yet refer to a string object. And because this is the default value of the string called name, when we call getName here in the account test method main at line 13, excuse me, that is going to get back the value null. And when you insert null in a string interpolation expression, it displays nothing. So that's why we saw nothing get displayed to the right of the colon in the first line of the program's output when we executed the program. So a lot of programmers like to explicitly specify default values. You can explicitly specify an actual string if you wanted to. So I could put a string literal here, like hello, for example, and that would now become the default value for that instance variable. If the regular default value for a given type is okay, then you can simply declare the variable and it will automatically take on whatever the default is for that type. So for class types, it's always going to be null by default. So string gets the value null by default. For simple types, it's whatever the default value is for that simple type. So for example, if I have an integer instance variable of type int, the default value would be 0 for that. If I had a bool variable which represents a true-false value, the default for that would be false, for example.